The Anonymous Media Wars game is underway, which means that by fall of 1903, everyone's identity was completely obvious. Diplomacy players really can't keep a secret. So this got me to thinking though, how many different types of diplomacy players are there? I've narrowed it down to 8 main archetypes. If you can figure out who your ally is and who your opponent is, it goes a long way to knowing how to work with them, or better yet, how to counter them. If you stick around until the end of the video, I'm going to apply these archetypes to the Media Wars game. This is Legendary Tactics. When Joseph Campbell noticed that the hero's journey usually employs a stock set of easily recognizable character archetypes, it was clear that he was onto something. And at first I thought I hadn't played with any of the diplomacy content providers in the Media Wars game, but it soon became apparent and also very useful to find that I had played with players very much like these in my own gaming groups. My goal in this video is to identify the 8 main diplomacy archetypes and to assess the relative strengths and weaknesses of each. After identifying the core list of 8 archetypes, I thought I'd look around the inner tube and see if anyone else has already done this. So I see a variation of this by Rumi Khan, but it also seems to fuse playstyle with character type, and I want to break these up into 2 different lists and different videos because there's an important distinction between who the player is and what strategies they employ. For example, you could be a manipulator, which is rather like a tinkerer, but you could be variants on that role such as offensive or defensive, naval or land-based. I'll get into playstyles in a subsequent video though. From Play Diplomacy Online, I see a list of 10 types, but again, these seem to be about the personalities of the player rather than about how their character is expressed in their strategy, and there are many possible hybridizations here. So let's get into the meat of this. I see 8 main archetypes. I'll name each one with both a positive and a negative title because players tend to express these differently, and sometimes they work for the player and sometimes against. Number 1, the Architect, or the Puppet Master. Number 2, the Diplomat, the People Pleaser. Number 3, the Gunboat Tactician, or the Quiet type. Number 4 is the Rookie, or the Dissembler. Number 5 is the Calculator, or the Ruthless Stabber. Number 6 is the Loyalist, or the Devotee. Number 7 is the Equivocator, or the Irresolute. And number 8 is the Shapeshifter, or the Wildcard. One challenge that's absolutely critical in diplomacy is to identify very quickly which of these players you're working with. It will help you know what approach to use when you're dialoguing with them. Remember that players sometimes change throughout a game, or they can express elements of multiple archetypes, but no matter what you see in the game, it's hard for a zebra to change its stripes, just as it's hard for a diplomacy player to be someone they are not. Let's start with the Architect. This is the easiest archetype to spot. Sometimes they're called the Puppet Master. This is the player who will communicate often and demonstrate to you that they have lots of knowledge about the game. They will often offer complicated options for openings right out of the gates. The player may be good at making you feel as if you're the only one they're communicating with, when in reality they're making equally detailed proposals to all of the other players. The Architect likes to bring countries together to create overarching strategies that can benefit the whole alliance, though ultimately they will tend to be the benefactor of such arrangements. This player is the classic genius or mastermind. They'll be very good at suggesting the perfect set of orders for you to execute, and likely spend a lot of time with a physical copy of the map, or they use the sandbox feature in Backstabber a lot. They are often very needy in terms of press. If you're aligned with a Puppet Master, be sure to give them lots of assurances and reply thoroughly to their ideas. Otherwise, they may feel their time has been wasted on you. The upside to this player shows that they're dedicated to the game and that they are a force to be reckoned with, and it's better to have this person plotting with and for you than against you. They will point out places of weakness in your defenses and suggest options for you to break your enemies. They're good at getting other players to antagonize each other, while they often play the neutral party who can join whichever side seems to be winning the war without committing too much. The downside for this player is often that they can be very paranoid and they'll read into the moves that you make, whether warranted or not. The Puppet Master variant of the Architect is one that does not like it when others reject their plans or try to plot their own course. They see, quote unquote, the best possible tactical options and are annoyed when other players don't want to follow through. So while they're good at guiding and controlling players, such as the Equivocator, they're not prepared to deal with players like the Shapeshifter or the Wildcard. The major downside to this approach is that they give a lot away in communications, and they can sometimes overwhelm busy players with too much information and too many ideas. Next we have the Diplomat, or the People Pleaser. Have you ever had a game shift on you and you have absolutely no clue why your allies turned against you or why your communications failed so badly? Chances are someone like the Diplomat was behind it. This is an affable player who's very good at communicating, either in writing or in person. They know how to use the right word at the right time. They often play on the emotions of the players rather than on the tactics side of the game. They aren't necessarily the best tactical player, but they are very good at forging alliances and getting other players to listen to them and do their bidding. Of all the types, these players are possibly the most dangerous because often you will have no idea how they got the whole board to flip on you. This player will often use jokes, memes, or witty banter of a social nature that unconsciously builds a sense of familiarity with other players. The upside to this, people are often reticent to take out the friendly player. This person is very much a people pleaser who relies heavily on goodwill and the better side of human nature to achieve his or her goals. This player is a master manipulator. People listen to them for intangible reasons, which may in fact just be the tone they use or saying the right thing at the right time to the right person. At a party, this is the cool kid who everyone wants to talk to. They effortlessly flow from one conversation to the next. The downside to this strategy is that the player can sometimes be viewed as a pushover. If you stuck around as a diplomacy player, you've been stabbed multiple times, and you've also done your share of stabbing. So you quickly get over the hesitation to stab a Mr. or Mrs. Nice Guy or Gal and get them out of the game fast so that everyone doesn't realize how amiable they are. This player is also dependent on who the other players are in the game, so sometimes their talent to persuade is not effective. When you're working in the intangible regions of the game, you may find inexplicably that your tried and true methods are no longer working and that you can slump for no apparent reason. Well, Diplomat, that's what you signed up for when you became the people pleaser. Next we have the Gunboat Tactician. Or the quiet type if you want to think about it negatively. I don't need to say much about this archetype. This player uses minimal communication. They express themselves succinctly. They're often very technically savvy, and there's no room for luck or intangibles in their play. The board speaks for itself. Your moves speak for themselves. There's no need for lengthy missives from this player type. The upside to this, it can be very successful. They don't often get a target painted on themselves for lying to their opponents or setting up elaborate schemes that piss people off. They read the board and the positioning not through what people tell them, but through what they actually see happening. The downside is it's very easy to misread a diplomacy board, especially if you're up against a shapeshifter. Other players can conspire to make a move that looks as if they're at odds, when in reality they're setting up a deception. Some players are very needy, and if you're not giving them the assurances they need or offering ideas that can benefit an alliance, the quiet types are likely to miss out when that ship sets sail. The Rookie, or the Dissembler. This is a player who's either new to the game, has been away from it for a while, or they're pretending that they're new to the game. The games have been around since 1959, so there are some seriously experienced players out there. But with the emergence of online platforms like Backstabber, the game is also popular with new players. Inexperienced players will sometimes make mistakes, miss their turn, or not really understand the long-term importance of their moves. This player doesn't know when to build a fleet versus an army, and they don't know how important spaces such as the Mid-Atlantic Ocean, MAO, or Munich are. The upside to the Rookie comes with often the fact that they have transferable skills from other games. Players often underestimate them and write them off early. They're not threatening, and they may even cause other players to let their guard down and to open their flanks up. The downside, well, clearly this player will not be as strong on the board side. They may forget to submit their orders, or they may not know how to input the order for a convoy properly. They likely don't know the difference between a north coast or a south coast in a territory, and they'll often make very odd decisions. Deal with it. They're new. Number 5 is the Calculator, or the Ruthless Stabber. This is a player who takes a clinical, tactical approach that balances press with board play. They'll weigh every decision based on what they see on the board and what they're hearing in the press. The calculator measures who can help them the most and makes their decisions based on the statistical probability that their moves will work. Likely, this player is well-read and knows every possible outcome of any given turn. They're also usually good at planning multiple turns in advance. When it's time to stab an ally, they will do so without batting an eyelash if the reward pays out. It's nothing personal, it's diplomacy. When the time is ripe, they will strike. The upside to this player is often very patient. They often play a safe game that minimizes risk and maximizes potential gain. This player is often very honest and forthright. They only lie or deceive when they absolutely have to, and they're good at making allies because they balance the need for a strong ally against the benefit that can be gained from the stab. This player will often finish in the top 3 on a board. The The downside to this player: the game comes with the human element that can completely mess with the calculator's clinical approach to board tactics and people management. If this player miscalculates and stabs too early, the opponent will often seek revenge. Number 6 is the Loyalist, or the Devotee. You don't see this one quite as often in Diplomacy, but it does exist. This player is the best kind of ally. They pick a partner from the beginning of the game, and they try to run the board together. If they can hold the alliance together, they're likely going to make it to the endgame, whereupon they'll get stabbed by their partner. This player tends not to leave much in reserve to defend against an allied incursion, which makes their forward line very strong, but their back line wide open. It takes a lot of trust to play this role. The player prides themselves on their reputation and may benefit from game to game if they become known as the player who stays true to their ally. They play the long game. The upside to this: the Loyalist is a player that everyone wants to work with. They have honorable intentions, and they're often well liked and respected at the table. Loyalty is rare in the game, so it's coveted by many. The downside to this is that they're vulnerable to attack from an ally, and they often don't see stabs coming. In their mind, their ally should be as devoted as they are. The Loyalist can sometimes end up propping up their ally and sending someone else to solo the board. Victory isn't their main goal, rather forging friendships is. Well, come to think of it, maybe this is an upside, not a downside. Number 7 is the Equivocator, or the Irresolute. This player often attempts to mislead with their writing or with their face-to-face conversations. They don't give much away. They're indecisive, they're non-committal, they try not to piss anybody off, and they tend to grow slowly and surely as other countries battle it out. They're masters of avoiding conflict and clear responses. Their orders will often move a piece in one direction, then reverse that move the following season. They're tantamount to a hedgehog or an armadillo hoping to go unnoticed. The upside is that they don't draw a lot of attention. They don't create a lot of conflict. They grow silently and they stay under the radar. Their orders are sometimes hard to read by opponents too, as they pretend to be Switzerland. The downside of this strategy is that working with this kind of player can be very frustrating. They tend to be vague and ambiguous to their own detriment. This kind of player often gets controlled by a stronger or more experienced country. The Shapeshifter, or the Wildcard, is our 8th and final trope. So I've left this one until the end. The Shapeshifter is a player that reads other players and becomes what they need to be. They use a mirroring technique. So players tend to respond well if they feel they're working with a like-minded ally. If an ally is wordy, the Shapeshifter's wordy. If an ally is curt and direct, so too is the Shapeshifter. Throughout the game, they may present different archetypes to different players. The loyal ally to one player, the Equivocator to another. And there's also room in this archetype for the type of player who does unique maneuvers that no one expects. After all, in a room full of really strong players, everyone knows the quote-unquote best moves that each power can make. So this is a player who counters those moves or who plays in an unexpected way. When it looks like they should defend their home centers, they launch a brazen attack. And it's very intentional too. It's not just random wildcard play. The upside of this is that this player is very flexible, and that's really important in diplomacy. Not being beholden to one approach can be very successful. This player approaches the game creatively, like an actor. The downside, though, be warned, it's hard to trust the wild card if you're privy to multiple sides of their play. It can be challenging for this player to determine what approach to use, too, in the first few years of play, and their entire strategy depends on that. It can be off-putting to other players if the wild card doesn't do what they're expected. So in the Media Wars game, I came in not knowing much about my opponents. So I'll put the links to their platforms and their resources below if you want to check out their work, as I most certainly did when I entered the game. I can tell you there are definitely no rookies in this game. If my opponents are listening, I hope this video doesn't drive you to give a reason to take me to the wood chipper, but I'm willing to risk it. So I'm up against Brother Board. You can check out his website here. He's a blogger. He's one of the world's best gunboat players, and I have actually named the Gunboat Tactician after him. He doesn't talk a lot in press, or at least not to me, but he makes his position clear with his orders. He's very succinct. Diplostrats, or Captain Meme, he comes to us as a commentator from the Liberty Cup and multiple other tournaments. He really knows his business. In my mind, he is a calculator. He assesses the game rationally and logically, and he balances the people side with the tactical side. If and when the time comes, he'll likely eat my centers for breakfast. The Diplomacy Broadcast Network, which is represented by Zachary Moore, is a fantastic site that's giving lots of coverage to diplomacy, and he runs tournaments like the Liberty Cup and seems to be known by everyone on the tournament circuit. I haven't had enough playtime or press with him yet to determine what player archetype he is, so help me out in the comments if you know Zach's archetype, or if you've been following the Media Wars game, please try to make an inference about what you think he might be. The Diplomat is represented by Go Horns Go. He's a podcaster who works closely with Umble the Heap, and he's absolutely the Shapeshifter or the Wildcard type. And some of that could be due to real life experience with COVID that he's going through right now, but like a mercenary, he's content to shift with the currents and to pivot on a dime. Next we have the Briefing's Champion. His name is Jeff, and The Briefing is a great weekly diplomacy publication by Umble the Heap. He's our game master, and it's full of juicy strategy tips and news about the game. Jeff is most certainly the architect. He's having a lot of fun working the board in this game despite battling a hurricane in real life. We've also got Ambi from diplomacygames.com, and he's the podcaster. He's got some seriously intense podcasts. They're very relaxed chats about the game and about other tangents that often revolve around beer and just general conversation, so very enjoyable to listen to. He's the affable diplomat, no question. He's definitely getting stuffed in this game, as his podcasting partner points out, but it's hard to find someone as amiable as Ambi when they're getting stabbed repeatedly by all of their neighbors. So, and lastly, I'm representing Legendary Tactics, and I guess a self-diagnosis is in order. I'm likely the Shapeshifter or the Wildcard. I don't always play a conventional style of game, and one technique I've been experimenting with in this game is to mirror the type of player that I think I'm working with or against, so I'm trying to reflect back to them whatever I see coming from them, and we'll see how that turns out for me. But you can follow the Media Wars game on Backstabber if you'd like to see how the game shakes out. This is Flash at Legendary Tactics. Make sure to stab the subscribe button and like buttons if this was helpful to you, and thanks for your time.